and in addition to her private practice, has also served since 9/11 on a national emergency response team for the delivery of services following critical incidences. Dr. Felsen is the chair of the Older Adults and Caregivers Group of the American Psychological Association Interdivision COVID-19 Task Force and the co-chair of the Trauma Working Group of the non-governmental organization on mental health in consultative relationship with the United Nations. She is a member of the National Center for Crisis Management and the American Academy of Experts in Traumatic Stress, and a board member of the Holocaust Council of Greater Metro West New Jersey. Without further ado, Dr. Felsen, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Florence and Rochelle and Lisa, for inviting me. I hope that this will be of some help to some of you. It's hopefully something you can also share with clients and colleagues. And like I said before, in many ways, there isn't all that much new to say about self-care that those of us who had really good moms didn't hear from our mothers growing up, but we tend to forget it, especially when we need it most. So hopefully it will just be a good refresher and reminder. I would like to share screen now, and then when we're done, we'll go back to being able to see everybody's faces. So I'm gonna share screen now. Just one sec. Whoops. Let me see. So as I'm sure you all have hoped, we all have hoped that things will slow down and come to a sort of a end around by 2021, and instead we're actually, I think, feeling the extra weight of an anniversary reaction, realizing just how far we are still from seeing the end. And, you know, each year the American Psychological Association surveys across the United States what are people feeling with regards to stress, the sources that people say stress them out, the intensity of stress that they're feeling, how they are responding to it, all kinds of aspects of our experiences of stress. And the 2020 survey shows that Americans are profoundly affected in terms of their stress level by COVID-19 and by everything else that came along with the pandemic. You know, many of us are actually speaking not only of a COVID-19 pandemic, but actually of about a 2020 syndemic, to indicate the synchronized sort of occurrence of a lot of crises in addition to the coronavirus itself. Social, political, economical, all of those other things that we've seen happening in addition and alongside. So the problem is that, first of all, the survey of 2020 shows that we have inordinate level of stress around the pandemic or the syndemic, and that factors that existed before that caused people stress are also still in place in the same way that they were before. So we're really talking about a significant addition in causes of stress and in levels of stress across the country. Specifically about us as therapists, I think many of you are therapists or service providers in a direct way. So please forgive me when I say therapists here, I will mean all of us who are providing direct service to older adults. There are many pieces that have appeared in the media in various publications that speak to the fact that therapists and service providers, direct service providers, are feeling under inordinate strain because of the pandemic and the stress that the population is feeling, and how much in need our services are and how difficult the situations are that we need to help people navigate through. In general, the nature of our work is very care intensive, and at this time, of course, even more so. And it's very important that we remember the reward of what we do and why we chose to do it. It is, I really do feel this way every day. I really mean it, that it is a privilege and a great honor to work with people and to be allowed into people's most intimate inner world and to try to help them. Uh, and it's very important, especially when things are so difficult for us, to try to remember in our own minds some of the most gratifying experiences that we had in our work and to sort of cherish them, enhance them, go back to them in our minds to help us remember the rewards of our work and thinking about those very good, positive uh, times when we felt that our help was meaningful and that we were competent and that we made a difference is also very supportive to us. So I will be, throughout the presentation, I will have some things that I highlighted in green that I hope you can sort of use as points for self-reflection. And what it will be is ways to remind yourself to think, how do you sustain yourself? What might you need? What might you need to enhance and increase in frequency in your life? What are new things that you might need to add? And what are the obstacles that you feel stand in your way to better self-care? We are the instrument of our craft. Just like the violin is the instrument of the musician, we have to take care of our instrument. Our relationship with our client, with our patient, has been shown in excellent studies to be the most important factor in the level of assistance that we can bring to our client, whether it's the outcome of psychotherapy or other aspects of our treatment relationship with our clients, medical and others. It is a very, very intensive type of personal investment that is required for the treatment alliance to be at its best. And therefore, it is a very intensive effort. It's a very important aspect of our care for our instrument, for the instrument of our craft, namely ourselves. It's our duty to ourselves and to our clients to take care of ourselves so that we can do a truly good job for them. So work-related stress in our fields cannot really be avoided at all at the best of times, and certainly not at times that are as intense as these times. And some of the misconceptions, which I know we all know of, but as I told you, I viewed it as an opportunity to review everything that is relevant to our self-care. We sometimes think that, sorry? We sometimes think that no one else is as impacted and as stressed out as I am, and that tends to be not the truth. Other people are also impacted. It's not just you. We tend to think, oh, well, it's just part of the job and I just have to push through. We sometimes think that if we let other people know how stressed we are, they'll think that we're not competent enough at our job or not professional enough. And we think that we ought to be able to handle it. Don't be a, don't be a baby. Don't be a, don't whine to yourself. And the truth is that we are not alone when we're feeling all these stresses. And when sometimes that stress actually does get to us, all of us experience it, especially over the last year. And it's not because we're doing anything wrong or not well enough. It's not our fault. It's not a weakness. It is really part of the job. And we have to acknowledge it in order to do something actually constructive about it. So this is I love the cartoons from the New Yorker. Who sanitizes the sanitizer? Which I thought was very relevant to what we're talking about. So I'll tell you just a few words about the way that we are built as a human species. and our survival and negativity bias. Evolution has prepared us to be equipped to survive in a difficult environment in which the species, started and continued its evolution. And in order to survive in that environment, what is really more important is noticing, remembering, negative things, things that are potentially dangerous for our survival, so that we can expect them and that we can act appropriately at the slightest sign that such a thing is facing us again. So we have to remember it we have to notice it very well, we have to remember it very well, and we have to expect danger in order to survive. And negative emotions are driven by negative memories and attention to negative things and negative expectations. So in some ways, our negativity bias, which has been installed in us in order to increase the likelihood of our survival, is also inherently sort of creating a certain tendency towards a more depressive way of experiencing the world. Depressed people, as we know, exaggerate these tendencies and gravitate particularly strongly towards the most negative aspects of their lives. But we can actually train our minds to veer away from the negative and to focus more intentionally on the positive. And one of the things that we've all become very familiar with, right, with the increased popularity of mindfulness and positive psychology, are things such as thinking every day, what are the 5 things that you are grateful for today? It's an exercise that really means to help us focus on the positive, veer away from what I need to do today and what I didn't get to do yesterday and what's going to happen and my boss is going to be angry with me and all of those things. But wait a second, what are the 5 things that I'm grateful for today? And that doesn't mean that we ignore the negative, but it means that we intentionally make sure to see also the positive alongside, which is really a trait or a capacity that we talk about in psychology as emotional complexity. Emotional complexity means increasing our capacity to see the good and the positive and to experience it alongside and in the midst of difficult emotional or difficult circumstances. The capacity to do both and not to be drawn completely into the negative and not to be, of course, in denial of the negative. So this is a very famous psychological embedded figure. You see it twice here, once in one form and once in another form. It's a very, very well-known figure. And I use it in order to give you a very real sense of the complexity of reality and how we actually continuously select which part of reality we focus on. So when you look at this picture, ask yourself right now, look at one of them, either the right side or the left side, and ask yourself, what do you see? Do you see a young woman or do you see an old, ugly hag? Usually, what happens is that our brain sees one of the two, either a young woman or an old woman, a very unattractive old woman. The point is, though, that if I were to go over the lines of the figure here with you, I could show you, if you spontaneously saw only the young woman, I can show you the old woman. And if you saw spontaneously the old woman, I can show you the young woman. I think I can probably do it this way. So here is the young woman, that's her cape. That's the fur color of her coat. That's a feather in her hair. This is her beautiful black hair. This is her ear. This is the line of her jaw, the line of her cheekbone, her eyelashes, and her tiny nose. And this is a necklace, a necklace around her neck. The old lady, on the other hand, has a head kerchief. This is her hair. She also has a feather there. This is her big nose, her eyes, her mouth, and her chin. And what I'm trying to say by this is we can train our brain to see the other part of reality, even though spontaneously it wasn't what our brain chose to see, but it's there. The old hag and the beautiful young woman are both part of this reality, and we can train our brain to see the part that we less intuitively saw. And that is, of course, true also about more complex aspects of reality. Now, fear and anxiety, as we feel them and as we've felt them in many, many ways this past year, are actually adaptive reactions. Fear is supposed to signal to us that there is a danger that we should respond to, and anxiety is supposed to give us a sense of agitation about a potential threat that is not yet there, but it's telling us to expect it. And they have their purpose. Anxiety actually is supposed to be a motivator, sort of an engine for appropriate action to help us prepare to protect ourselves with appropriate measures for something that might be coming that's dangerous. Like, for example, I'll tell you in a second anyway. So, but anxiety is really only useful, we say, when it is within the window of tolerance. Too little anxiety doesn't motivate us enough to do the right thing and to take the right action to protect ourselves. And too much anxiety can be incapacitating and very unuseful. It's like too little anxiety might have made people not worried enough and not motivated to wear the mask when it was necessary, to wash your hands, to keep social distance. That's too little anxiety, and it's not adaptive. Too much anxiety can make us have negative mental health symptoms, which of course is also not what we would want. So what is important, first of all, in order to keep anxiety within that window of tolerance that allows us to function well and to respond well to whatever it is that we need to do in order to protect ourselves, we need to notice the signs of anxiety and the triggers of anxiety in ourselves to be able to monitor ourselves better. So one of the things to notice, for example, is, are you moving faster than usual? Are you speaking faster than usual? That might mean that you're anxious. Are you beaming into the future with all kinds of thoughts and questions like, what if, what will happen if this and that? What will happen if this and that? That's a sign of anxiety. Are you finding yourself overgeneralizing, over catastrophizing? All of those things are signs of elevated anxiety, which then mean we might need to do something to help ourselves down regulate that anxiety. And we'll talk a lot about that as we continue today. So anxiety leads us to feel a hyper awareness to anything that could signify a threat. It's like an overactive alarm system that may overreact. You know, I always say it's like the alarm system that I had in my previous house. We had this alarm system that would go off with lights that would go off not only when a person came near the porch, but when any squirrel or bird or bat flew by, it would come on. An alarm system that becomes so overreactive stops being useful, actually, right? Because it doesn't alarm you anymore to real danger. It just alarms you all the time to things that actually are meaningless. And that is not good for our mental health. It's not good for our physical health either, to be alarmed like that all the time by things that we don't really need to do anything about. Another thing that we have to be aware of is social contagion. We need to know that anxiety is greatly influenced and can be greatly elevated by certain social contagion processes. So we need to know who and what and how much do we expose ourselves to social contagion, whether it's by too much watching too much media coverage, or being with people who we know are very anxious themselves. And the opposite of it, might be, as Mr. Rogers was known to say, focus on the helpers, right? So focus less on the terrible stories, focus more on the helpers, on what is good out there. And physical factors are also very important, of course, in triggering or in exacerbating anxiety. We know that lack of sleep, too much caffeine, poor nutrition, all of those things are also things that will increase or exacerbate our anxiety. So here is a website, the Jeffrey Zeig's website. I suggest that you check it out. He has a lot of YouTube clips and all kinds of interesting things about anxiety management. And here is just a tiny little example of tiny little mindful anxiety management exercises that we can all use. And it's amazing to me sometimes how helpful these things are to us, things that take 5 minutes. Like when you do feel that your anxiety has come to a certain elevated place based on the signs and triggers that we just reviewed, pay attention, take a few minutes and just pay attention to your breath and try to just breathe in, like breathe in deeply and take a long breath in on the count of 3, like 1, 2, 3, in, hold it for 1 count, and release on 3 counts. Just regulating our breath has been shown to do something very important for our self-regulation. Other people like a small exercise that's called tense relax, like tense up every muscle in your body, take a deep breath, count to 3 and release, and repeat that a few times. Other options are little mindfulness exercises, such as take a few minutes to just focus on your immediate physical surrounding and count 5 things that you can see, 5 things that you sense in a tactile way, 5 things that you hear, just kind of distracting yourself from the anxiety and doing these little down regulating exercises. Another example is the safe place, which we will talk perhaps again at a later slide on. Go to a safe place in your mind, either a place that you were at or a place that you imagine that makes you feel very calm, very safe, very good, and really think about it for a couple of minutes. But what's very important is to think about it evoking as many sensations as you can. Like, let's say if you're by the beach, try to remember in your body the feeling of the sand between your toes, scent of the air, the sound of the wave, the sound of the seagulls. What did you see? The taste of the salt on your lips. Because the more neural circuits are evoked, the more effective the exercise is. And we'll talk about a lot of other things as we continue. And again, to just stress the caretaker responsibility that we have, the better we calm ourselves and maintain our anxiety within the window of tolerance, the better we'll be able to be available in the best way to other people around us, to be kinder and to be more supportive to them. So we talked about this, and just to remind ourselves, all of these things that we're talking about are important about well-being in general and in particular at difficult times. And research about positive psychology has tried to identify in an empirical way what is actually being happy and what is actually well-being. What are the things that make people feel this way, happy, and that they have a good sense of well-being? And there's a lot of research about it. And there are 2 concepts that I wanted to highlight for you from it. One is the concept of subjective well-being, which means a combination of feeling positive emotions and how much we appreciate and are satisfied with our lives. And the other one is the concept of psychological well-being, which is not so much about how satisfied we are or how much we experience positive emotions. It's more about how much we have a feeling of autonomy, of personal growth, of having a purpose in our lives, of having achieved a certain self-acceptance, a sense of mastery, and a connection to others. And these are, of course, we could talk a lot about it, and I don't really want to get too deeply into it, but I think it's very important for us to look at the psychological well-being and the aspects of it which are so relevant to what we do in our work. There is so much of it that we do in our work. We have so much of a sense of purpose. We have so much focus on connection with others. We do often feel a lot of sense of personal growth through the knowledge and the interactions that we have. And those things, actually, the dimensions of psychological well-being have been found in studies to be very highly correlated with less depression and a better sense of overall well-being, and even actually with lower mortality in some longitudinal studies. Whereas the subjective well-being is, of course, very important as experiences of, peak moments of excitement and joy, but it hasn't been correlated as much with the same things as psychological well-being, because it tends to go back to the baseline. Every one of us has, in some sense, a certain genetically determined point of happiness, and the momentary experiences of having a great trip or a wonderful, delicious meal or a wonderful party, or even having won some award, brings a certain peak in that sense, but we tend to go back to our baseline. Whereas the psychological well-being is something we can work more consistently on, and we all are doing that in our work a lot. So what I like to emphasize is PERMA, which is the acronym from positive psychology, of what I think is a good combination for what actually makes us have a sense of well-being and happiness. And that's very, very important for all of us to check with ourselves. P for positive emotions. It's very important to learn to pay attention to how we notice, amplify, and extend the experience of good things that happen to us. How many times can we spend 3 hours talking to a good friend about some very annoying interaction with our boss or with our spouse or with our child, but talk for only 5 minutes about something great that happened, or not even mention it at all? So to pay attention to our capacity to notice, to enhance, and to amplify the duration and the place inside that we give to good experiences and to positive moments. Engagement, we have a lot of in our work. We have the capacity to find our own unique talents and strength and find ways to use them as much as possible, both in our work and in our leisure time. The relationship issue has been found in multiple studies to be an incredibly strong correlate of well-being. Whether it's, I suggest that you look at on YouTube, there's a beautiful TED Talk with the current director of the longest longitudinal study on adult development, which is the one in Harvard. It's been going on for over 85 years now, and it showed very clearly that the quality of relationships, not the number of them, but having a few very close relationships is very, very important for our well-being. So investing in our close relationship is a very important aspect of maintaining and sustaining our well-being. Meaning is a lot of what is in our work, you know, using our strengths and our talents for something that serves something more or bigger than us, and the sense of accomplishment that one gets from having done something or accomplished something that is meaningful to us and to others. So a very important acronym to remember, especially with regards to the amplification of positive experiences, which is such an important capacity, is Hanson's HEAL, which is, first of all, either have beneficial experiences, notice them, or create them. Yes. Second, once you've had a good experience that's positive, enrich it, stay with it, feel it fully, let yourself really sort of bathe in it. Don't rush through it. Don't push it aside. Be with it and give it its due place inside so that it can nourish you. Absorb it, really receive it, take it in, and possibly link it or go to it when you need some self-soothing, when you're too wrapped up in a painful experience or a painful thought. Go to that positive experience to nourish yourself. In EMDR language, we call it the resources. Use your resources, build your resources, have them ready in your mind, and go there when you need it. And this is another cartoon, because you know I love the cartoons. And this is the art of knowing is knowing what to ignore, right? So here are two people looking at the same reality. One of them is seeing the grill on the window that keeps him from freedom. The other one sees the beautiful nature outside. That's part of the capacity that we have to train our mind, to train our brain to go where we needed to go. So the spiral of stress takes us from a state of flourishing through a state of surviving, then to stress, distress, and potentially as professionals to impairment and to improper behavior. So here is my first self-reflection point to us all. Where along the continuum do you think you are presently? Be honest with yourself. It's very, very important to sometimes actually ask ourselves this very, very important question. What is actually working for you in terms of your self-care right now? What do you think needs strengthening? And what maybe you need to create anew, something that you haven't been doing, but you actually need to introduce into your life? So the definition of resilience, which is what we need these days in order to deal with everything that we are dealing with, the definition offered by the American Psychological Association is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, threats, and significant sources of stress. Resilience, I want to emphasize to you, is a lot of things, and we use it interchangeably, and we need to be clear in our minds how we think of it whenever we use it, because we can use it as referring to a trait that the person has, to a process, which is the way that we cope with a particular situation, or an outcome, meaning the person went through something very difficult and came out well from it, so they are resilient. But it also is important to remember these distinctions, because sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking that we or someone else is either resilient or not resilient. And that is not true, because really what we see from research is resilience lies on a continuum, and one can be more resilient or less resilient at different times in life, in different situations, uh, in different circumstances. And so we need to remember that about ourselves and about others. And what's important because of that is to know that resilience can also be enhanced, because it is not a trait that is a constant that someone either is or isn't. We can help people and we can help ourselves enhance our resilience in every particular time and at every particular, in every context. So this past year, we absolutely lived through a very stressful time for all of us, and many of us suffered personal trauma. And it says the statistics show that every 1 out of 5 of us has somebody that they knew personally in their circle who died of COVID. And what we know about stressful situations is that the sooner we accept a new reality and adapt to it, the better we will manage through it. And some of the things that were true throughout this year are that following a clear plan and structuring our lives, even though we're all now working from Zoom and it is so difficult to keep good boundaries and good structures and all of those things, it is very, very important. It helps us be less anxious. And so to do those things and to make plans about how to keep the family safe and how to manage our responsibilities with all of the financial stresses that some of us are also dealing with is very important. Mining the past is the capacity to look at what has been helpful to you in the past through difficult times and try to understand when we had to tolerate uncertainty in the past, such as when waiting for a medical test result or other things that were difficult for us, what was helpful, and use that. Mine the past, mine our past experiences for the coping that helped us through difficult points. Again, avoiding what ifs is a very good idea. We have a lot of uncertainty right now. We don't really know a lot of things and we don't know how things will be. And what we can do is focus our ability and our energy on the things that we can do well now. That is the best and most conserving use of our energy rather than spending it on hypothetical scenarios that we cannot predict and know right now. The 3 C's are a good way for me to remind people that what we need to do at times like that, when anxiety is high, is to focus on what makes us feel competent, even if in the beginning of COVID it was tidying that drawer, that messy drawer that you never got to. Even if it's just that, anything that makes us feel competent and in control, connection with others, and creativity, using our creativity in any way we can. So, as I said before, specifically going now to focus on self-care, I'm looking at the time. How much time do I have left? At least 15 minutes, I hope, right, Florence?
Yeah, 45 minutes. Yeah. Can you
Say
hear
what?
me? Hold on.
I
45
have,
minutes.
so I have 15 minutes left.
Yeah. Yeah, we have until 5. So whatever
Okay,
time you think you need for
okay, great,
Q&A. Yeah.
fantastic. So focusing now more specifically on self-care, we need to be as kind and gentle with ourselves as we would like to be to someone else that we are fond of. It's a mindset and a lifelong practice. It's not something that we do once a year. It's not good enough to go on vacation once a year. It's not good enough to do something nice for ourselves every so many months. There is no one right way that is self-care for all of us. You know, I have a friend who for whom self-care is running. It's kind of the last thing that I would consider self-care in some ways for myself. But you know, everybody's different. Take yourself where you are is a really good, I think, point, whether we talk about psychological self-care, mental self-care, or physical self-care. You know, just start where you are. Don't be hard on yourself for the fact that you can't run 5 miles. Maybe you can just run 100 meters or walk briskly, and that's a good enough start. This is not about perfection. Self-care is not about perfection. It's about beginning to do something that cares for your needs, that makes you feel better. Give yourself permission to take that time, to take that attitude. Don't compare yourself to others, and commit to actually taking action in this direction, whichever it is. These are just kind of like the big philosophical sort of statements, and we're going to go to the nitty-gritty in a minute. So what is self-care? Again, still at the level of how we look at it in the bigger picture. It's critical to maintaining our well-being and our resilience to stress and trauma. We cannot think that we can do without. That would be a grandiose and somewhat delusional way of looking at things if we think that self-care is something we can do without. It's a self-initiated practice of taking an active role in protecting ourselves. It's tending to oneself, it's getting to know oneself and know what it is that self-care means to me, what it is that I need, not what my friend needs, and really honoring these needs. Most important, we really need to make the time to make the deliberate plan that will allow us to act on these things once we've identified them for ourselves. So as a start, we need to think for a minute, what are our preferred energy and anxiety management strategies in a big way in life? Some of us feel rejuvenated or feel recharged by connecting with our spouse or someone close. Some of us need sleep. Some of us, it's meditation, prayer, positive imagery, controlled breathing, all of those other methods that I have here, exercise, yoga, dance. For some of us, it's sex that makes us feel younger, rejuvenated, connected, revitalized. Laughter and humor is a very important way of doing it. And for others, it's reading. For some of us, it's even doing some work, depends on which work. For others, it's organizing. For others, it's creative activities. So identify what are the things that recharge your batteries and be, again, honest about it. So lived self-care, as opposed to these great philosophical attitudes that I just managed, is something that it's the manner and the degree to which these things that I just managed are actually woven into the fabric of your daily life. How do you actually practice it in your daily life? And we all know that there is a great gap, usually, between knowing about self-care and all the things that I said until now and actually practicing it regularly in our own life. So a question for you, how much of a priority is self-care in your daily life right now? Again, don't judge yourself, just be honest, reflecting upon it. Is it an integrated way of living, or is it that you do something great for yourself every 3 weeks? Is there something on your list of things that you hope to get to in terms of your self-care? Are you somewhere in between, being there, wanting to get there? Where are you on that spectrum of where you think good self-care for yourself would be? I really cannot recommend enough this deck of cards for us as professionals and for many people who are not professionals working with other people. It's called the Anti-Burnout card deck, and it has a lot, I think 52 cards with all kinds of excellent suggestions for self-care. And I think I got it from Amazon for like $12. I really, really recommend it. And if we have time, I'll give you some examples from it. Effective self-care, as I said, is very personal and very individualized. So you have to figure out what is right for you, or if you're helping somebody else, you have to be very specific in helping them find what's right for them. it is something that is nourishing and replenishing, and it is something that's integrated into daily life in a flexible way. You know, if you think that self-care means that you must get up every morning at 5:30 to exercise, and one day you're not feeling so good, but you can't not get up and exercise, then there is something a little bit off keel with your flexibility, and it becomes a little bit less of a self-care practice and a little bit too rigid. And the last point, which is very important, is that we have to have a varied pattern of different strategies of self-care, so that if one of them is not available, we can turn to others, such as happened to us when COVID came, and all of a sudden, a lot of things that we used to do were not available to us anymore. How important was it for those of us who had things that they could veer to that were in our ability? So there are many barriers that people mention on their way to effective self-care. And all of the following are seen in research to be associated with ineffective self-care. The myth of vulnerability, so the belief among professionals that our training insulates us from risk, that we're beyond it. The lack of awareness to our own needs, which is something that actually inadvertently is sometimes encouraged. Someone has their sound on. I'm hearing somebody else talking. I'm just mentioning, if you haven't muted yourself, it would be helpful if you did. So actually, lack of awareness to our own needs is often something that is inadvertently encouraged in our training and in our work. Pay attention to that. Guilt, not knowing how to be effective caring for ourselves, and mistaken belief that many of us have that taking care of ourselves is narcissistic, is self-indulgent or selfish, that it's a sign of weakness, or that we never were taught to prioritize or to attend to our self-care, whether in our family growing up or in our training. And lastly, and probably the one that we most cite as mental health professionals, is lack of time. Lack of time. We don't have the time to take care of ourselves. We're too busy taking care of other people. And when you look at studies that question professionals why they don't seek help, so some of the most common reasons given by mental health professionals for why they don't seek help themselves when they do feel that they could use it is that we worry about confidentiality, we worry about the financial expense, we are worried about being exposed somehow, we have very strong self-sufficiency desires. We want to be able to take care of ourselves, and we sometimes feel that just because we are professionals, and on one hand we need someone who's particularly well trained, and on the other hand we need to find someone who's outside our professional and social circles, and that makes it a little bit hard to find someone, and of course the time constraints. And yet, just to emphasize, studies do show that, like everybody else, we sometimes suffer from the same issues that other people suffer from in our personal lives, and like other people, we actually can benefit from therapy when needed. So just again, some points for self-reflection. What barriers might be impeding your own self-care at this time? What are 2 actions that you can take to address some of these barriers? And do you recognize any of the poor self-care deadly dozen, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes? So the poor self-care deadly dozen, which are from this paper that I'm citing here, include the following. toxic supervisor and colleague support, little fun in life or work, only a fuzzy and unarticulated understanding of one's own needs, no professional development process that turns experiences into greater competence and less anxiety, no energy-giving personal life, an inability to say no to unreasonable requests. I should have highlighted this one in red because it's a very, very big one for many of us in the helping professions. We didn't come to the helping professions by accident. And so both at work and in our personal life, we tend to have a hard time saying no to unreasonable requests, or saying no to reasonable requests even, but requests that are not good for us to accept at that time. Setting boundaries, in other words. Vicarious traumatization that takes an accumulated toll on us. Personal relationships that are predominantly one way, where we are doing most of the caretaking and not really being sufficiently cared for in our relationships. Perfectionism, continual unresolved and ambiguous professional losses. You know, in our profession, we have both losses in the sense of patients dying, especially when we work with elderly people. By the way, the APA does not allow anymore the use of the term elderly. They are older adults, and we're not supposed to use the term elderly. But when we work with very much older adults, we have real losses where people pass away. We have losses in a sense sometimes when treatments end for a variety of reasons, even for the good reasons. But since we invest so much of ourselves in the relationship, then that can be also on some level a loss. And certainly when it is what's called in our field ambiguous loss, such as when a patient with whom you worked for quite a while disappears without even telling you goodbye or why they disappeared or what happened, and you never know. So the accumulation of those experiences is another factor. A strong need to be needed is a risk factor. Professional success being defined solely by our clients, our students, or our patients' change or appreciation is a very dangerous one, because we cannot change or improve the lives of every single person that we work with, and we have to accept that limitation. So those are the deadly dozen, and it would be a good thing to try and identify for each of you which are the top 3 for you personally. What's detracting or putting you at risk right now of these risk factors? Which are the 3 top ones for you? Another thing to think about, and that comes from the same website as the deck of cards, the burnout cards that I showed you, is how many of these things do you usually do in a day? Okay, caring for yourself is in the face of difficult work is what we need to do. Our work can be very difficult, very draining, very overwhelming, and we need to sustain ourselves. How many of these do you do each day? Get enough sleep, get enough to eat and good food to eat, vary the work that you do some light exercise, even if it's just moving a little bit, do something pleasurable, focus on what you did well, learn from your mistakes, share a joke, pray, meditate, or relax, or sing, or dance, or whatever it is that is in that category for you, and support someone else. Another thing is think for a minute. We have the kind of work that is very difficult to leave at the office. And having the capacity to be in better control and regulate better our ability to turn from work to our personal space, to our personal life, and from our personal life to our work is extremely important in our fields. So think about it, how to become better at doing that, at switching between these modes. And here are a couple of suggestions. And like I said, you can see this same card that I copied here for you on the website of the Anti-Burnout card deck, which I will be happy to share with you at a later point. So we talked about resilience and we talked about that. Sorry that I have a duplicated slide there, and that it can be, oh, I'm going back by mistake. Yeah. So in order to grow our resilience, we have to have experiences that will allow us to get there, because, you know, we cannot really talk about resilience without talking about trauma and stress and experiences in which such coping was necessary. Because as long as everything is great, you don't know how much resilience you have. We can only talk about resilience in the face of some trying circumstances or experiences. And so the key to growing our resilience is to have, or any psychological resource really, is having those experiences and not only going through them, but making them become something that we can use repeatedly, and in that way make it create lasting changes in our neural circuits, because we know that neuroplasticity is something that is continuously there. Our brains are continuously changing, and as Cozzolino, who's a neuropsychologist, said, the brain is a social organ. Our brain continues to change all the time through its interaction with the physical environment and primarily through its interactions with the social environment. We keep changing all the time. And the more we have certain experiences, the more we strengthen some new neural circuits, the better available they become to us. And the less we use older patterns, the easier it is to veer away from them, which is a good thing to remember as we try to change less positive habits and develop more positive habits. So the process of creating change in our neural circuits through experience involves the experience of what we need to grow, and installation, as it's called, also in EMDR terms. So converting that experience, that passing experience, into a lasting change, which we can do by creating experiences, noticing experiences, thinking about them and activating them in our mind again and again, because of the famous, you know, concept, if you like, phenomenon that Donald Hebb put in such an eloquent way when he said, neurons that fire together wire together. So if we think about difficult situations and how we coped with them, we are actually evoking the same neural circuit that was involved in the experience itself. And if we do that for positive things, if we do that for the things that were helpful for us, we are evoking the same neural circuit. And when we do something that is new, that we think is a good new thing about self-care, and we do it again and again and again, we are activating that experience, we are installing it by repeating it, and we are creating that neural circuit and strengthening it by repetition. This is, again, a short slide that I can share with you afterwards about, you know, the 10 things that different researchers kind of from different perspectives identify as important elements of fostering our resilience. Clinician, know thyself. I think it's very important for us in order to be able to function well as people and as professionals. We need to know ourselves better, and self-awareness is very important in our field. It helps us manage countertransference during sessions and in general in our contact with certain clients, certain people. Some of our clients, some of our people are, let me put it this way. Some of us don't get to choose their clients. Some of us don't get to choose to work only with the people that we feel we will have a wonderful time working with. And so we need to be very self-aware and able to manage the countertransference that some of our more difficult patients evoke in us, or some of the more difficult life circumstances or situations that our patients are dealing with evoke in us. Yes. So we need to be self-aware because, for example, a clinician who lost her father at an early age might have very powerful reactions when she's working now with some young person who just lost their father to COVID, or those obvious examples that I think you're very well aware of. And we know that having gone through something similar, if you like, to what our patient is going through, can have a lot of different outcomes in terms of the coping of the clinician. It can make us more sensitive and more empathic to what the other person is going through. It can also do the opposite. It can make us judgmental and hardened because I went through it and I did such and such. You can too, or why can't you? It can have all kinds of implications to the way that we handle our countertransference. And self-awareness, therefore, is a very important aspect. It also, a better sense of self-awareness helps us in terms of increasing our engagement with our patients or with our clients in an appropriate manner. And as I said very early on today, the quality and the genuine, authentic strength of the alliance with our clients is the most important element in determining the outcome. And it allows us also to be more aware of our own biases, our own stereotypes. None of us is free of emotional biases and stereotypes. And I think that's a topic of a whole conversation in and of itself, which I think I actually touched upon in the previous time when I had the honor of speaking to the ESCOTA community. So it's very, very important to become aware of it. And I want to mention to you in this context that Harvard University, on its, there's a website that I can share with you where you can fill out a test that is scored automatically and anonymously that actually gives you a sense of your own racial stereotyping. And so I always say, take it at your own risk, because the results are often much less pretty than we would like to think of ourselves. But it's a very important, I think, thing to become aware of our own biases of all kinds. And here I gave you a list of self-assessment tools that help us assess our quality of life, our resilience, and many other aspects, and I'll be happy to share with you. This is, I took a screenshot of this one particular tool, which is particularly relevant to what we're talking about right now, the Professional Quality of Life Measure, and it's online and it's free. You can take it for free. Of course, there are great limitations to self-assessment. We know that there is a overall, not just amongst professionals, in general, people have what we call a superiority bias. So when we ask people about any kind of aspect of their competences or skills, people tend to rate themselves better. So let's say in a simple example of this study where drivers were asked to rate their driving skills, 80% said that they are about average. Now, we know statistically speaking that that is not possible, right? And that we would like to think does not apply to highly trained clinicians, but studies suggest that it does. For example, this study showed that in a survey of 129 mental health professionals, nobody rated their skills as below average. The modal place, so the place where the mode of the study was the 75th percentile. So more than half rated themselves as 75th percentile or higher, and 25% rated their skills at the 90th percentile or above. So we are likely also as healthcare professionals to overestimate or estimate our skills, our competencies like everybody else. And we are likely to fail to recognize problems with our competence in mostly when we actually are either the least competent, it's most pronounced amongst the least competent individuals, and it's more pronounced when we actually are already compromised rather than when we're not, which is obvious. I mean, it's kind of very understandable. So one of the things that is very, very important in order to support our competence and support our ability to judge how well we are doing at any given time, because you know, there's a difference in our competence level when we are doing well, when we're doing not so well, when God forbid we're dealing with some personal crisis, our competence might be a little bit less than it used to be. It can also go back to being better. It's not a constant. And one of the ways to maintain both our competence and our awareness to where we're at with regards to our competence at any given time is the development of what's referred to by these writers as competence constellations, which are basically networks of other colleagues and professionals where we feel that we can improve our professional competence, where we can talk freely and without fear of repercussions or judgment about the moments where we don't know what to do with a patient, or we are unhappy with our performance or our functioning or any other problem, where we can get the support and the feedback that we need without fear of judgment. So that kind of a thing is actually extremely important in our work, because our work is so much something that cannot be, it's not strictly factual. It is an art. And there is so much to countertransference, and to the reaction that we have to our patients, to our clients, is so much a very useful tool in our work, but also a potential risk factor. So we really need others who are also highly trained in our profession to be able to discuss this with. It's not helpful to discuss it with your husband or with your best friend, because they don't have the same level of competencies and insight into the matters that complicate this issue as your colleagues and peers. Self-reflection again.
Irit, I'm sorry to cut in. This is so fantastic. Hold on. I just wanted to give you a time check. It's 4:46. So
okay,
maybe
so let's just do this, and
they could put it in the chat box and you could wrap up.
yes, so
Okay.
I will just stop with this. Just stop to think with yourself. Do you have a competence constellation? Is it broad and deep enough? Is there something that you need to change? Do you need to find some people to do it with? Who in your surrounding, or who that you would like to reach out to might be a good person to add to your competence constellation? And with that, I will stop and we'll take comments and reactions. Thank you so much.